Alrighty, so the Jazz are under the microscope once again, and I asked you guys for some topics of discussion because I actually didn't have very many. I wanted to talk about Taylor Hendricks a little bit, but honestly, that was as far as I had gotten to it in my head. So obviously, you guys did deliver, and so we'll cover most, if not all of them, in this video. I'm gonna try and not be too long-winded, though I kind of drag it sometimes. Nevertheless, we're going to go ahead and get right into this one. So the first one was from Tayton. He said that we could talk about the elevation of Flip from year 1 to year 2, as well as how Bryce kind of fits into things and how he's looking overall, along with Will Hardy's coaching extension. So going in order, looking at Kyle Filipowski, obviously he looked good to me last season. I knew that he was a lottery pick talent, and I said it all the time, but the fact that we didn't have to move up at all, to this day is still miraculous, and it's amazing because as they say, one man's trash is another man's treasure, and he was never trash. People just overlooked him. Now, at the same time, I do understand some teams, not wanting to get involved in certain types of drama and stuff, but I still stand by the fact of if the drama is not created by the player and is created by people outside of the player, there's not much that you need to go off of and focus on and say, this guy did this thing and we can't really get too involved with that. It just doesn't really make sense to me. He was efficient last year. He wasn't tremendous from beyond the arc, but he was solid enough to show us that he can eventually reach that stretch four potential that we saw in him. Now, obviously, coming into this season, he was hot at the end of last season, and he had spotty minutes here, there, and everywhere in between. As the season went on, he got more minutes, and he had a couple starts here and there. But it was really in the summer league where, again, it is a summer league. We don't make too many crazy predictions. But still, I mean, come on, the guy was putting up 30. So, and on incredible efficiency. It's one thing to have a lot of games where you score a lot of points as a young guy. It's a whole nother thing to have a lot of points and be incredibly efficient. Games where you're shooting high 60s, low 70s from the field entirely, where you're hitting most, if not borderline, all of your threes in a game, and you're taking a very sizable amount. You are the leading shot taker on that roster, and occasionally, if you're not one, you're definitely two, especially when Bryce Sensible finally got shut down because he was shooting lights out as well. Kyle was taking that next step in front of us, and again, it's summer league. A lot of those guys are really hungry, but they're not all going to be on NBA contracts. They're not all going to eventually be stars in the league. Some of them will be, but for the most part, not all of them are going to be. At the same time, the shots we saw him taking in the summer league showed a lot of promising things. The touch was there. The finesse was there. The intelligence was there. Him deciding when he needed to follow the structure of the play that was supposed to be ran and when it was time to go ahead and break and run free was also something that was going to be important, because that's the biggest difference between some guys that just end up being put in a role like let's say DeAndre Ayton. He's very cemented in the way his brain thinks, and he doesn't really get outside of himself, which can be beneficial in some situations because you know exactly what to expect from him, but it can also be problematic because that's all you can expect from him. For Kyle Filipowski, though, you kind of want to put him into a box just a little bit, or give him a loose cage that he can kind of rock back and forth in, and he can open the door himself, like one of those birds that just watches you, one of the parrots that just watches you put the latch outside the gate, and then it just opens the gate itself eventually and just comes out. Like, him having the discernment and understanding at his young age and young NBA experience level to make decisions on his own and live and die with the consequences is also something that cannot be overstated. And honestly, it's one of the best things that I like about him, because it's one thing to have an incredible skill set. We all know somebody that has a great skill set. There's a lot of players across the NBA that have deep bags, but a lot of times the way they apply their bag either helps or hinders them. And in a lot of cases, it tends to hinder some people because, for example, in the case of Cam Thomas, he's incredibly skilled. Nobody can convince me that he is not skilled. However, unfortunately, the way a lot of teams and a lot of organizations are seeing him at the moment is as a guy that just kind of fills up the sheet with empty calories. And it's understandable, because he does like to shoot the ball. He claims, or his camp claims, that he says that he believes he's an borderline elite playmaker and play finisher potentially. His efficiency isn't terrific. It's because of the type of shots that he takes, and he's not known to be the greatest passer of the basketball, so I don't know how true that is. I'd like to see, him take that next step, and he's young, but who's to say? We've got a long ways to go before we really know where he sits on the totem pole and where in the entire NBA hierarchy he can be, honestly placed. For Kyle Filipowski, I think that coming into this year, he's going to continue with that momentum that he had in the summer league. He's going to keep building on the strong end of last season that he had. Honestly, he had a pretty solid season overall, but the end was definitely a lot better than the beginning because, he had more minutes, he had more opportunities to showcase what he is. And then in the summer league, obviously, he was the head of the snake once Bryce Sensible went out. And even when Bryce Sensible was there, he was still had the other half of the two. They were a two-sided coin, and both of them were liable to torch you on a night in, night out basis. Now, the question will be if he starts or if he comes off the bench. Honestly, it won't be too much of a difference, but I would assume that if he comes off the bench, he'll have a few less minutes to work with. Nevertheless, he showed us last season that he can come off the bench and he doesn't need to warm up. He doesn't need to heat up. He comes ready to go. So I'd like to believe that we see a huge uptick in scoring from him. Rebounds, obviously, sizable uptick. Playmaking is going to be something that I want to see what happens as far as the schemes that Will Hardy decides to draw up. Obviously, the goal is to tank this year, but at the same time, we want to see, viewable basketball. We don't want to turn on the TV and want to immediately turn it off. And I think that him learning how to be a playmaking four / smallish ball five kind of guy would do wonders for his value going forward, especially if he continues to show a certain level of porous nature in his play style when it comes to post defense specifically. Now, on the perimeter, I'm content with how he moves right now. Instincts, he could use a little bit more just fine-tuning in that department. But overall, when it comes to the overall scoring load that he has to take care of, I think that he's going to be reliable. I think he's got to be efficient with his touches. And, of course, there's going to be the small ruts, the cold streaks and whatnot. But overall, I think that he's going to take a step forward. I have no reason to believe that he won't. Honestly, if he stayed the same as he was last year, I wouldn't be pissed. But I also would be kind of surprised, especially looking at the way that he played really, really freaking well in this summer league. Going on to Bryce. Man, I like Bryce. Coming out of Ohio State, I had question marks because you could argue even now his conditioning doesn't look quite, or his frame, I guess, in his jersey kind of gives more Luka when he transitioned from the Mavericks to the Lakers and less of a, Luka right now in the offseason, where everybody sees how, not necessarily shredded, but just smaller and more compact he looks. Bryce has obviously worked on his body. I know that he's worked on his conditioning, but I don't know that we'll ever see extreme fitness Bryce, which isn't problematic though, because his efficiency is there. Last season, the efficiency was there. Dare I say, if Keontae George, and I've said it before, I'll say it again, if Keontae George took a step forward efficiency-wise like Bryce Sensible did last year, people would be glazing Keontae to the moon and back. The only reason Bryce doesn't get that same glaze is because, he was the lowest on the totem pole when he was drafted, the year that he was drafted. And he was not necessarily viewed as an afterthought, but he was just like oh, cool, he's here. And that's as far as the thought went. But it was one of those things where, yes, as a scorer, if he could learn to be extremely efficient and he wasn't porous on defense, then he would be able to play a sizable chunk of minutes. And he could maybe not be the core piece of the roster once everything's all in order, but he could definitely hang around and he can have some very clutch plays and some very important moments in some very big games. And I think that rings even more true now because we're seeing the efficiency. We're seeing the confidence. He was never necessarily a non-confident player, but coming to the NBA level and still knowing who you are at your core and knowing what shots you need to take, what shots you can go ahead and afford to swing the ball somewhere else, and which ones for a fact, if I don't shoot this, I'm going to hate myself for it later. And he has a good knack for understanding which shots need to go and which ones aren't his to take on certain possessions. He still has to grow, obviously, on that side of the ball as a playmaker. I'd like to see him take a couple strides forward this season. I don't know that he will, though. It just depends on who we focus on playmaking wise. Is it a thing where we want to focus on our bigs? We want to say Walker. We want to say Lauri. We want to say Taylor Hendricks when he comes back. We want to say Flip. If we go that route, I could see that if we want to focus more on our guards and we say, hey, Isaiah Collier, we know you can play make, but we want to see Ace Bailey do some stuff. We want to see the junior come out and do some stuff, right? We want to see Tone J. If he does crack the rotation and get some sizable minutes, I think he's going to spend a lot of time in the G League, but if he does crack the rotation, especially later on in the season when, the thing actually happens, do you put the ball in his hands a little bit more? Just depending on what route they decide to go as a coaching staff and as a front office could tell us a lot about where his development path is going, because the efficiency's there. Defensively, he's looking a little bit better. He's looking a little bit more in shape. He's not a lockdown defender by any stretch of the imagination, but he's serviceable, right? I can deal with a slight negative, especially if you have the efficiency that he had in the summer league. It's not going to translate entirely to the NBA level, or the next level, the regular season. But if he can continue to build on what he had last season and he shoots either the same or slight, like 2-3 percentage points higher, both from the field and from 3-point range, that's a darn good shooter right there. Off the catch, darn good shooter right there. Off the dribble, like that too. Taking it to the rack, we would like to see how he does with that and how he absorbs contact, but I like the way that sounds. And if you're going to be incredibly efficient or just above average efficiency and you're only slightly negative defensively, your instincts allow you to get your hand in the passing lanes here and there. You get a couple deflections, but you're not necessarily going to hold somebody that normally averages 25 to, 17. I can live with that. I can live if they get 27 one night. We're tanking this year, so it doesn't really matter. But, I mean, you never really know. And I think that he's going to be the really big surprise. Obviously, a lot of people were talking about him being, our summer league MVP alongside Flip. And honestly, they were 1A, 2A, 1A, 1B in that kind of role because they were both incredibly efficient. They both played and shot the ball lights out, and they looked like men amongst boys. And that was the thing that you always want to see from your guys, but it's just not easy to replicate, if that makes sense. Like last year, Keontae George didn't come out the summer league shooting like Bryce Sensible did. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Again, it's the summer league. You take it with a grain of salt. You look at it, you say, oh, there's some interesting things we saw here. There's some interesting things we saw there. But overall, let's see if it translates to the regular season. Because if it doesn't, well, we just saw, 8-ish games of fun basketball, but it didn't really mean anything because it didn't change how we are able to evaluate you. Because you can't do that for real. That you've been exposed at the next level. And that's one of those things that you got to keep an eye on. But I like the way they're both trending. I love the way they're both trending. Moving on to Will Hardy's extension. I think that is necessary to do. I don't want to blame it. It sucks for him because when they brought him in, they said, yeah, hey, we might see how we look this year. And then we started winning. That was back when we had Simone Fontecchio, we had Ochai Agbaji, we had Kelly Olynyk. We were like, oh yeah, man, we're winning games. Stop that. Okay? And then we, blew up that roster for the most part and kept going. And it was like, we're tanking every year. You're the new coach, so we can't properly, focus on your development as a head coach, but we can kind of get your feet wet and we don't have to have crazy expectations for you because we want you to lose. So as long as you lose enough games, you're cool. But I do think that as a younger coach and somebody who's more fluid in his thought processes, the way that he views the game, the way he talks to the guys, the way he communicates with everybody, the way that he focuses on watching film, the way that he's not a stick in the mud that always just sticks to one plan. And win, lose, or draw, he's going to stick to that plan because I don't believe in that mantra. I feel that it's always necessary as a coach for you to take that next step forward, for you to be proactive, for you to go over film, see what works, see what doesn't work, put it all together, and 1 + 1 is always going to equal 2. You can't force 1 + 1 to equal 4 at any point. That's just not how the numbers work. And we've seen a lot of coaches that are more traditional, force their ideologies onto their players and hope for the best, basically. In games, they keep calling the same thing. The same actions are not working, but they will not go away from that action because that's the action that they know most. That's the thing that they coach their players on, and that's the thing that they're going to stand by, no matter what. So I don't necessarily subscribe to the thought process that him being a losing coach matters when it comes to contract extension time because the goal was to lose. The only time I say a coach failed is if there was a specific plan in place and the coach just failed to reach that goal. If you give a coach all the talent in the world and over a 5-year period, they can't even make a conference finals, that's a bad coach. unless you're going to tell me that the talent is bad and it's just a terrible fit. But one could also argue the right coach with the right system could make all that talent work. It just kind of depends. It's like glass. Sometimes when you look at it, there's no shine, there's no shimmer. It's just kind of there. And sometimes you can't even see it the way it's positioned. But if you turn your perspective just a little bit, you can see a glimmer in the light. So I think with Will Hardy, he's one of those guys where when the time comes, he will step up. But I cannot say it with certainty because we haven't played, a season where we want to win games, where we want to be the best iteration of ourselves. I've seen little cracks here and there. I've seen him get creative with certain lineups. I've seen him try different things. And I know that his brain is capable, but we have to wait until, hopefully this is the last year of tanking, by the way. That's in my head, that's what it is. So hopefully next year, right, with Will Hardy at the helm again, even if it's a short-term, coaching contract as the head coach, that we put him on just to see how he looks when we actually care about winning basketball games. I do think that he is the coach for the Utah Jazz for the future, as it stands. Now, that could be amended, but even from when he first came in the building, I felt comfortable and I believed in what he represented. Moving on to Matthews, he said, out of the young core, who do you think will be an all-star role player off the team in 3 years? So for young player, I just defined it. I picked guys under 25. So for the sake of argument, Elijah Harkless will not be on this list. Not sure if anybody cared about Elijah Harkless, but yeah. So you've got, pull up a list. You got Taylor Hendricks, 21, Keontae, 21, Flip, 21, Cody Williams, 20, Isaiah Collier, 20, Walker Kessler, 23, and then obviously you have our three rookies. Tonje is probably going to be the odd man out as it stands, but again, he could take the route of Bryce Sensible where he plays himself into the limelight, so to speak, where that he matters because he demands that you recognize his existence. And I would be definitely over the moon about that, but it's going to take a minute for us to actually see that play out. Or if he's just, going to be a G Leaguer that just kind of plays on two-way contracts and tweener kind of stages going forward, which is entirely feasible, but it's too early to tell for him. However, for obviously our upper two, I think that they're going to be really reliable pieces. I think in my head that Isaiah Collier will end up losing the point guard battle. However, at the beginning of this season, at least, he is the starting point guard. Last season, the way he was as a playmaker, despite being slightly turnover prone, is going to be enough. And because he has understanding of the offensive system as it is, even though he can't shoot worth a lick, is going to be the thing that allows him to start out the gate. However, if he continues to shoot like 23% from three-point range over the first 10 games of the season, if I'm Will Hardy, he's sitting right there on the bench beside me. And I'm going to let my rookie take a crack at it because my rookie can shoot. He's not a terrible passer at all. He just wasn't forced to do it a lot like that when he was in college because he was the best shooter on his team. I can teach a man, what passes are the passes we want him to make as long as he's willing to pass, right? He's intelligent. Him having had basically all 5 years he was in college. So he's got the understanding of the game. He's got the NBA body. He just needs to play against NBA guys and make NBA level mistakes. And then he's all ready to go. And there's nothing else that you can complain about from there. So I think that Isaiah Collier could potentially play himself out of things. I hope he doesn't. But if he never learns to shoot and his free throw percentage is, bad enough to make us question a lot of things, you could see a world where he's no longer on the roster. Most likely via trade as opposed to, or maybe a sign and trade. I could see a sign and trade and he's gone. And this is under the assumption that he doesn't learn to shoot, which concerningly enough is an unfortunate possibility for him. Taylor Hendricks, I need to see what he looks like this year. I am one of the biggest Taylor Hendricks believers. Even though his shooting percentages haven't been terrific, he takes the shot that I want him to take. Defensively, I love everything that he stands for. I love his hustle. I love his grit. I love his grind. I love his intensity on that side of the ball. That's what I love to have. But again, right? I need him to hit more threes. I would love to see him put the ball on the deck some more. We saw Lauri Markkanen's numbers across the board dip last year. Part of it was indeed due to injury, despite any analyst, with ESPN or whoever the heck wants to say. He was actually injured for a significant portion of the season. He does have lower back problems and whatnot. He's a 7-footer, and he's not one of those, back to basket 3 dribbles and a hook shot bigs, right? He's a up and down the floor, put the ball on the deck, do a spin move, drive to the lane, try and get a dunk, step back 3-man. He tries to do a little bit of everything. So those type of injuries are going to be expected. I want Taylor Hendricks to follow that level of progression, hopefully. And I'd like to think, based on the pictures that I've seen, he looks to be in terrific shape. Obviously, he's not able to do terribly much with his legs, weight training wise. So a lot of people look at his upper body photos and it's like, God, you got big, dude. And it's like, yeah, if you're an NBA player and you get paid millions of dollars and you're always there, you're always around your guys, they're in the gym or whatever, and you're trying to get better, but you can't work out your leg because you literally have a lower leg. You have a leg injury that was incredibly severe, right? And you're doing rehab and whatnot for that. And you got to make sure everything was set on that. The only thing you can work out is your upper body. That's just kind of how it goes. I am going to be bold here, though, and say Taylor Hendricks in 3 years is an all-star. That's absolutely ludicrous for me to say, but I'm going to say it anyways. I have a really good feeling about this year, and I will likely, but the odds are against me. I'm going to go ahead and say that. The odds are against me. He may stink the bucket this year. He may get overtaken by maybe overtaken by Kyle Filipowski this year, and he just may be, unfortunately, behind the 8 ball. It's extremely feasible. It can happen. And a lot of people might argue that it will happen because of the summer league action and the numbers that Kyle Filipowski put together. I could see that happening. But everything that Kyle Filipowski isn't defensively, Taylor Hendricks is defensively. I was about to say the opposite on offense, but the fact of the matter is Kyle's just the clearly, at this moment, better offensive player. So they're kind of a yin and yang for each other. One's a really incredible defender. The other person is a really incredible offensive player, particularly from the scoring department. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Not all-star, but definitely well-recognized across the league as a menace defensively. I think he'll have a reliable 3-point shot at that point. I think he'll be able to go downhill and punish some people at the rim. I hope. I'm going to sit on that. Keontae George, I think this year he has a really good year and cements his place in Utah. I don't see him being an all-star, but I do see him, if he gets everything in order, being a really reliable piece, somebody that's going to take that next step, somebody who's going to be a important piece on the roster going forward, even if he doesn't end up being, the number one guy. I think he has a couple of games where he really comes up big when we need him most, and he helps us make some playoff pushes when we really want to see things happen. But again, he has to be better this year. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. The pressure is mounted. If he continues to shoot 39% from the field and 33, 34% from three-point range, he's going to be seeing the bench first, and then he's going to be seeing, nowhere. He's going to be seeing the pine. He's going to be seeing the locker room. He's going to be seeing a different roster. He's going to be in a different jersey. I don't think his career will be over, of course, but it's going to be hard to justifiably keep him around if he's not taking any steps forward and you have other guys that are definitely taking steps forward. Kyle Filipowski. He, because of his scoring knack and the way his brain works as an offensive player, I believe that he will potentially be an all-star. Year 4, potentially. I think that he might garner some votes. I'll go ahead and backtrack a little bit more on Taylor Hendricks. He'll be widely regarded, widely appreciated, but he won't garner the same level of desire and respect because Kyle Filipowski is a scorer. And for everybody else, a lot of people like buckets, right? Defense is cool. Not everybody thinks defense is sexy, though. Getting a bucket, man, something about getting a bucket just gets people's engines going. And Kyle Filipowski is about a bucket. That's one thing he is. So I don't think that he is an all-star, but I think he is on the ballot, and he's just on the outside looking in. Cody Williams is a wild card because I'm not going to say he needs to have a great season this year, but he needs to do something. This summer league, he was willing to shoot the ball a lot. He was really confident. The ball didn't always go in. I think he had 2 really good games, and the rest shooting-wise, he was kind of rough. But he was still letting that thing fly, especially once Bryce Sensible went out. But I'm hoping that he shows us something. I don't want to fault him too much for not being the guy that made the biggest, step forward. I don't think he should have been drafted as high as he was, but he was, right? So there's a certain level of merit and understanding that comes with that. I think that he is a guy that will be able to take that next step, and he will be a reliable person for the roster at some point. I don't want to give up on him defensively. I think he has the instincts that he needs to be successful, but he also has to make sure he puts on a couple more pounds. He has to make sure his frame does fit well enough. And as long as those things come into play, you could see him being a staple on the team. I don't think he does anything tremendous, but I think that he's just a reliable depth piece, kind of like 8th and 9th man on the Pacers that we saw in the finals this year, right? You don't need him to get off, but if he randomly pitches in 12 points on one night and then, he gives you 2 because he gave you 2 or 3 the last night, you say, hey, that's great. Thank you. One of those kind of things. I think I said Isaiah Collier already, so we'll go Walker Kessler. I enjoy Walker Kessler greatly. I don't want to see Walker Kessler get traded, but I do see a world where they either draft somebody or Kyle Filipowski or Taylor Hendricks potentially takes that next step and makes him slightly expendable. One thing I will say, if Walker Kessler isn't demanding crazy money when it's contract extension time, I see no reason why we should trade him. At the point where you're sitting there saying, dang, we might have to pay him $30 million a year because that's what he's demanding, then yes. All right. If he still can't give me 70% from the free throw line, he doesn't even have a serviceable mid-range ball. Yeah, I love him as a defender and I enjoy watching him play basketball. But if you can't shoot worth a lick and you have very limited usability, right? He's really just Rudy Gobert with slightly warmer hands. Slightly better hands at this point. Rudy Gobert is overpaid to me, but you can't ignore the impact that he has on the defense side of the floor. Walker Kessler is similar defensively, but that also means he has similar issues. He can be similarly exploited. So if you can keep him on contract and, you give him 22, maybe no more than like 25, 26 M's on the extension. I think that would be comfortable, especially with the way the new CBA deal is structured and everything like that. That's not a tremendous overpay. That's no longer, back in when you had the big 3 with the Miami Heat and guys were making 24, 25 million and you were Chris Bosh, you were D-Wade, you were LeBron. No, this is like modest, respectable starter, not perennial all-star, but starter, strong role piece kind of character guy type money. And I think that is where he's at. Again, if he doesn't learn how to shoot, I could see a world where we decide to dump him. But if we can re-sign him for low 20 millions or extend him from low 20 millions, I think that we should. I think it's the correct decision to make, and I see no reason why we should go in any other direction. Bryce Sensible, you could make the argument he's going to be an all-star. Out of everybody on the list, of course, ignoring our rookies because I want to see them play a full season. I think they're going to be on the team regardless after 3 years, but I need to see how far I can trust them as potential all-star caliber players. I would say Bryce, Kyle, and Walker, dependent on how his scoring averages look over these next 3 years. I could see them all walking into or knocking on the door of a all-star appearance. Obviously, Walker Kessler might be a little bit closer because the competition for centers isn't. Alfred Sengun, Jokic. Competition might be steep. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, I'm bugging out a little bit, but you never know. It's still a possibility. Huza said, what to expect from Lauri if he breaks out again at Eurobasket, which is set to start in about a month. The last time most improved production when he had a head start to the season. Will the Jazz manipulate lineups to lose? And how will they hide Lauri if he starts beasting again? Luckily, the league won't find you if you play your best player and learn how to mismanage him. We've seen it happen time and time again. And I do think that he will, if he performs well with Eurobasket, and that's kind of like his warm-up thing, similar to last time, he will have a really, really good shooting season. I like to see him continue to get better as a person that puts the ball on the deck and as a playmaker. I like to see him read the floor just a little bit better when the ball is in his hands and being incredibly efficient with the ball in his hands. But outside of that, we can still lose a lot of games even if he's really, really efficient. I watched some people say that the Jazz had to get rid of Colin Sexton because he would force us to win too many games this year. And I disagreed with that take because he played 63 games last season and we sat him a couple. He did end up having that one, I think it was a hand injury or wrist injury that kept him out for like 7-8 games. But outside of that, the rest of the games, we usually sat him because, rest, random injury day to day pops up. And he shot borderline 50-40-90 splits. So you can have one really good score and still be a god-awful team or have a god-awful record. It's definitely possible. You can definitely do it. I've seen a lot of teams be capable of doing it. The Jazz are no exception to that rule. If he's the one guy that consistently on a night in, night out basis shoots like borderline career high percentages for him, then I could see a couple games where, it's a back-to-back. We're playing a team that's bad. We're playing the Wizards. We're playing the Nets. And, Lauri has a day-to-day. I almost said he stubbed his toe. He has a foot issue day-to-day. Well, he doesn't play that game. I could see that happening, right? That's not off the table at all. I think there's going to be a few games where we manipulate lineups and he doesn't play at all. I think there's also going to be a couple lineups where you see him on the court and we're playing a team that we could potentially beat, but you also see Cody Williams and Isaiah Collier on the floor at the same time. Neither of them shoot really well. And if they don't take any incredible strides forward, that's not a lineup that you want on the floor together. If you see Isaiah Collier, Walker Kessler, Cody Williams, Lauri, and honestly, it really doesn't matter who you put the fifth player is. They can't save that lineup. Let's say you go Ace, right? And let's say Lauri and Ace are your main shooters. Well, you're fried. Because 60%, there's a 60% chance, just looking at the players that are on the court, chance that you have somebody that should not be taking a certain shot, potentially taking a shot. Somebody taking a jumper that shouldn't be taking a jumper. Obviously, Walker is going to be a little bit of a stretch to say that because he doesn't take really jumpers like that. But you never know, and opportunities are always on the table in the right situations. I would say we'll see a little bit of volatility in the lineups. I think we're going to try a lot of things. We're going to do almost any lineup that you can possibly think of, you're going to see this season. At the same time, I think Lauri is also going to be incredibly efficient with the ball in his hands. I think he's going to take the next step as a playmaker slightly. I could see a world where he takes a little over 4, where he has a little over 4 assists on a night in, night out basis. Maybe even closer to 5, maybe 4.7. I'm not going to say 5 though, because I feel like that might be a little bit high for him specifically. But I do think that he does follow that trend from the previous time, and he comes into the season shooting really, really well, nevertheless. Moving on to the next, we have Luke Luna, who said, how are young upstarts compared to those on other teams that are further in their builds, being Orlando, Houston, and the Pistons, or even comps between teams in similar places being the Wizards and the Nets? And I pulled up a list of the top 3 guys, again, under 25 for the respective organizations. The Magic are in a league of their own. Between them, the Rockets and the Pistons, to me, the Magic are an entirely different team because they're pretty well constructed. They could use some more shooting, but I watched somebody be the closest version of LeBron James, of young LeBron, like first stint Cavs LeBron, and get no genuine respect for what he's done, what he's doing, and what he's done. And that person is Paolo Banchero. Obviously, he has Franz Wagner and some other pieces over there, and there was a lot of injuries to their core at different points in the season. But I watched that man take a team with, I believe it was Kentavious Caldwell-Pope being their best shooter and a lot of times their only shooter on the floor, and force them to win games. Dare I say, demand them to win games. I saw him get doubled and tripled at the free throw line, make the correct pass, and then somebody misses the shot. But it didn't matter because he was going to shoot well enough in the game to demand victory. And in the playoffs, he was no different. He was an elite decision maker. His athleticism is there. The playmaking is there. His IQ is where it needs to be. His shot selection is where it needs to be. I would like to see him get a 3-point ball of his own. I'm not going to sit there and say, pop an Anthony Edwards and just go crazy. But I would like to see him develop one of his own that can kind of not serve as a thing for him to lead on whenever he gets tired, but to diversify his game just a little bit more and make it so that, guys are a little bit easier to blow past to make sure that the defense stays honest, basically. Obviously they have Franz Wagner and he's 23. Paolo's only 22 right now, actually. Franz is 23 and he's borderline an all-star caliber player in his own right. You have Jalen Suggs. There's a lot of guys on that roster that are capable. They're very well-rounded aside from the shooting issues that they still need to address a little bit more. They did a little bit this offseason, but I need them to take a little bit more initiative in that side of things. But we don't have our Paolo, so to speak. And maybe Ace Bailey could be that guy. But right now, I don't know that he is. And Paolo's one of those guys where he's tough. Like undoubtedly. Like there's some other guys, like Franz is tough, right? Franz is definitely tough. But Paolo is just a different animal in my eyes. So I don't see a world where we reach their level unless we have a player of that caliber on our roster. And maybe if Lauri takes that next step as a playmaker and as a guy that puts the ball on the deck and he can get his own buckets, then maybe you could say that about him. But looking at guys under 25, they're just a little bit better because of the top end talent that they have between both Paolo and Franz. Looking at the Rockets, I would say the Pistons are a little bit ahead of the Rockets. I'm a little bit more concerned about them. I watched that man, Cade Cunningham, gain like 30 years of experience in his first couple years in the league because he was forced to, and the Pistons were terrible. But he was the one, shining star. And then you have Jaden Ivey, who's 22, coming in. You have Jalen Duren, who's 21. A lot of guys taking some big, big steps forward. I like their young core. I like how they lean on each other. I like how they hold each other accountable. And defensively, they are competent. They don't let anybody walk all over them. They don't let anybody abuse them. They make sure that they stand up for theirs and stand up for their own, and they take pride in that on that side of the ball. Offensively, we could see some definite strides that go forward. They're a lot more obtainable because I think it's going to be easier for Ace Bailey to be a Cade Cunningham or for our junior to be a Cade Cunningham as opposed to one of our guys to be Paolo. And honestly, despite the Pistons, being pretty good, if you take Cade Cunningham off that team is not nearly as good as it is, right? You take Paolo off that team, that team with being Franz-led can still be okay. They're not going to be great. They're not going to be They're not going to be jaw-dropping, eye-popping. They're going to be there. They're going to be okay. But there's nobody like that on the Pistons. Jaden Ivey has his moments, but he's not Cade Cunningham to me. He's not consistent enough, at least. And then obviously you have the Rockets, they traded away Jalen Green to get Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant's up there, but he's still that closer that they needed. So we're going to focus on the fact that they still have Alperen Sengun, and they still have, is it Amen Thompson? It's not Asur. Asur is with the Pistons, right? Asur is with the Pistons, and while he hasn't really emerged the same way his brother has, he's still one of those guys. He's one of those boys. He's a defensive menace, and if he gets a jumper, it's going to be scary. But Amen with the Rockets, alongside Alperen Sengun, Shangun, I think it is. It's an interesting duo. They're not perfect. They're not elite shooting from a young core standpoint. We beat them in shooting right now as we are. But overall, they are pretty obtainable because they, previous to adding Kevin Durant, and you could argue even with Kevin Durant, they're not a team with a true ace, with a guy who that's your heart. That's the heart and soul of the team. And you could say that the Jazz, while we have like Lauri and guys like that, we don't have a heart. We don't have our number one, our guaranteed number one. We can't live without this guy. We don't have that kind of guy. So the Rockets are the most obtainable for us. Depending on the development of Ace Bailey and some other guys, the Pistons are that next level that we could see. And then for the Orlando Magic, that just depends on if Ace Bailey is really him or if we still have to find our him character, so to speak. Looking at the Wizards and the Nets, though, I think we're ahead of the Wizards. I think we're also ahead of the Nets. I am up in the air about the Hornets right now because the things they did this offseason were actually really, really surprising to me, and I was genuinely impressed. So I might give them the edge just a little bit because if you just look at it from a point guard standpoint and you say, no injuries, you go roster for roster, I believe the Hornets are the more competent organization, which feels crazy to say. I didn't think I would say that about anything, except for maybe when they talk about the Wizards. That said, the Wizards, they have Bub Carrington, they have Alex Sarr, they have Bilal Coulibaly. They got a lot of guys that are taking steps forward. They have a lot of young talent. They have Trey Johnson, who I loved. Oh my goodness, his bag is so crazy. He's the most skilled player on that roster, but he's going to have to show it, obviously, at the NBA level. Efficiency is going to be their worst nightmare because last year I think that everybody was like low 40s, like 42% from the field. Some guys were even high third, like 38, 39% from the field. Overall, they're able to do some really good things. And I think that they will end up meshing better together. But as it stands, we're ahead of them. I'm like 100% certain of that. Maybe 97 if I'm being generous. But for certain, we washed the Wizards, both from a talent standpoint and from a timeline standpoint, despite, all the stuff we've been through. The Wizards just have too much turmoil going on. Cam Thomas, is he staying? Is he going? Is he taking the contract extension? Is he not? Is somebody else going to pay him? Is somebody not? Is he who he thinks he is? Or is he who the league thinks he is? Daron Sharp, how much do you trust him, developing as a big, but not necessarily considered one of the best young guys in the league yet, even as things are standing. Who else from that young core do you really lean on? Now they drafted a lot of guys. What was it? They had the most first round picks actually. I want to say they had 5. If memory serves me right, they literally had like 5 first round draft picks. They drafted Igor crazy high. That didn't make sense to me. I would still think that they should get Igor, but the way they got him was crazy. They have 5 first round picks, so we could see a lineup at this point, at some point in the season, where all 5 of them start together. But again, we're ahead of the Nets. There's too much turmoil. Like, we have a direction. We're missing something clearly, but we have a direction. The Wizards need to glue together. They need more. They definitely need more efficiency. There's nobody in the summer league that they had play that looked like popped off the page efficiency wise either. And then you have the Brooklyn Nets who just are in entire disarray. But yeah, I'm fairly confident in what the Jazz have going on as things stand right now. And last but not least, We have one from Fabiero who said, is Taylor's ideal position at power forward or small forward, and if he should start alongside Ace in the future, especially if they deserve to start, and in the event that Lauri is not anymore on the Jazz. And for me, Taylor will have the opportunity to prove which position he is depending on if he can put the ball on the floor this year. If he can't put the ball on the floor at all, he's going to be at the 4 and Lauri will be at the 3, which is fine, right? Taylor Hendricks, even if we went small and Taylor Hendricks is my 5, and he doesn't necessarily provide the same strength at the rim that Walker does, but he's not the same liability that Kyle Filipowski is. So him and Filipowski on the floor at the same time, I could see happening more often than not, more often than a lot of people will, consider. I also think that if he can't put the ball on the deck, like I said, he's going to fall into that forward center niche area. He's going to be that power forward center split, that tweener guy. I think that he can be a small forward, but if he's worse with the ball in his hands dribbling than Lauri is, and he doesn't show promise as a playmaker, nah. On offense, we're going to call him PJ Washington. You know what PJ Washington did in the finals 2 years ago? Shot threes in the corner, and when they didn't let him shoot threes in the corner, he shot threes above the break, and it broke him. Hopefully that doesn't happen, of course. But I don't want to see him relegated to that spot. So I'd like to see him be more of a 4 or be more of a 3. I think he's going to try a lot of small forward things this year to show us whether he can or cannot do it. This is going to be the only year where he gets to try it. And obviously he has to come back healthy. He's almost 100%, So we'll see probably around the 40 game mark, him starting to, just do a lot more stuff, just trying stuff like Lauri did last year. But I don't know what the end result will be just yet. I don't have enough college tape that makes me feel comfortable in guaranteeing anything. But if I were to lean one way and you said you have $100, you have to pick, I'm putting my 100 on him probably staying at the 4 as it stands. I hope that Lauri's still here, but if Lauri isn't here, that means that something went wrong with our development path. And that's going to be some key thing to focus on. Obviously, with Colin Sexton, I don't necessarily love that we sent him away. It makes me feel as though we believe that somebody that we drafted, wink, wink, can fill his role really, really fast and be almost the exact same, if not better than him by the time he's 25. Now, I'm not going to say who he is, but, he has a junior in his name. And I think that he, right behind Trey Johnson, was the best shooter in this year's draft class. So we could see something happen there. But nevertheless, again, if Lauri stays on the team, you'll know what happened. If Lauri also is not on the team, you'll know what that likely entails as far as our growth. Or maybe we just, draft a diamond in the rough and somebody goes crazy and just supersedes Lauri and makes Lauri completely expendable. Though I don't think that's going to happen. But you never know. The league has a lot of parody in it, a lot of irony in it. But I've talked you guys' heads off a lot more than I planned on it. I hope I touched on everybody's points as well as I could have. I'll probably drop a post later on this week asking about next week's video just to see what type of topics you guys want to talk about then. As always, drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know who you think might be on the team, or tell me who you think will have the most all-star potential. Give me a top 3 all-star potential in 3 years, and then tell me who you think are going to be the odd men out, whether it be because they just don't develop, whether it be because they're bad, or if it's just somebody just outplays them. Like, they're okay, but some other guys on the roster are just that much better. As always, it's been your boy Wraith Hoops. If you made it this far, I appreciate you. Smash that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications, become a member of the channel to get the videos faster than anybody else. And as always, good morning, good evening, and good night, no matter where you're on the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.